So are those actual, are those lines or polylines? What are those walls, Preston?
They're definitely locked, but it's a line.
Okay, so the difference between doing it one at a time and doing all of them at a time is which menu item you use and what those things are made out of. So if they're actually individual lines, polylines, things like that, you would pick the over lines routine, and then you could basically select one of them and then select similar maybe. It would select all of them, and then you could add points to every single one of these endpoints if you wanted to automatically. So sometimes it gets too crazy and there's way too many points. So it's just a judgment by you guys of how many points you really wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. It just kind of sets up points like where the lines would like intersect or something. Is that how that works?
Yeah, it'll put points you can put points on the ends of each one of those line segments that you select. You can put them in the midpoint. You can put them there's a bunch of different options.
Okay.
Right. So
Seeing if I can get it to work with it being locked. I don't know if it's gonna let me do it. Yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not. I'll let me do it because it's locked. We have to go unlock them.
Is it just the layers locked?
Yeah.
Yeah, just go unlock everything. You don't have to worry about it.
Oh, so it only unlocked that one section. That's crazy. Okay. But, hopefully it'll allow us to do what we need to do here. So.
And as you can see, it works just like AutoCAD, where you've got the screen over here, but down on your menu down at the bottom, your text box, it's telling you what you're supposed to be doing next. So just like any other AutoCAD command, if you keep an eye on that, it'll usually walk you through all of your options.
And I'm just gonna do 100 here just for our sake of, because I believe you just started at 1 because it picked up 21 would be your next one, and you had 20 points in there. So just for our sake of our training purposes, I'm going to go to 100 here. Okay, we can select how we want it. Do we want to do intersections, right? Or we want to do endpoints? These were two lines here and here. If I do endpoints, obviously my expectation would be that you would have 4, right? We would here, and here. If we did intersections, I would believe we'd get one at each one of these intersections, right? And then center, it's obviously going to do its best to give you a midpoint along the way. I'm going to select endpoint. And it's saying there should be 2 lines that are selected. Go next. Let's call this let's go wall for now.
And the whole point of the group is just to separate everything. When it goes to the data collector, it'll put these points on a different layer than it has the other points. It allows you to export points out in different time periods. Let's just say you had a file here and you had all your underground done, and it also had all of your first floor points on it as well. Well, you only wanted to lay out the underground at this point. So if you put all your underground under one group, then you could just export those points out only, and you wouldn't have to see the rest of them, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
We're going to go next. We're going to keep everything default. I'm not worried about the route order, but ultimately what that's telling you to do is if you want it to actually, when it auto places these points, it'll do its best to try to do it in a way that when you do lay it out, it'll be by number, right? So if it was this, it would go, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Or S would be 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So here I'm not worried about that, but that's what this is for.
That's more so like you're not bouncing around in the field laying out.
Correct. You just try to maximize your time to be more productive out in the field. Correct.
Okay. So back in the olden days, before we had smart layout software that could do next nearest point, we spent a lot of time on mapping out the direction that our guys wanted to do layout in. We don't really need to worry about that anymore because the layout software now says, okay, if you just laid out this point, I'm going to take you to the next closest point that we're standing to. So it doesn't make, it's not as important as it used to be back in the day.
Okay.
On a line, it has 0 and -0. I'm not sure if I think there must be stacked lines here.
Yeah. Yeah, more than likely.
So
Probably-
I'm just gonna uncheck that.
Okay.
That way we only have one, but that's what that tells me. It means that there's more than one line there because I windowed up. I don't know if you saw I did a right window up and just selected the line. So it selected whatever was there, right? So my guess is that it's 2 lines, but we'll just go with 0 for our example. And so let's see, it's given us 2 points instead of 4. So let's see
I would go back and select the other one, and probably it'll put the other 2 back on.
Oh. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, there it is. So that one line is at -0 and the other one's at 0. Interesting enough.
It's just an AutoCAD thing.
Yep.
Mhm.
And then every time you place a point or do anything, you need to go back and do update drawing before anything shows up. So if you think something got missed or something didn't work, hit the update drawing and then make sure nothing showed up.
Right. I've had that happen already once. So I was like, oh, why is it not popping up? And
Yeah, it's like a regen all, but for point manager. I don't know why they did it that way. It's just one of the things. So as you can see, the more lines you pick, the more points you're going to get. Right. So if you did the whole architectural background, it's going to put a point on the endpoint of every line in that architectural background that you picked. And it could be too much, might be just right. Just depends.
Yep. And then obviously you can see that it put the point there because if we hover over it, the line endpoint is there versus here. Same, here, obviously it did exactly what we asked it to do.
Right.
Okay. So that's kind of your way of automating, one way of automating, especially on a single line aspect, automating points. Like you just said, you can do all of it. You can do sections of it. It could be overkill. It may, like you said, it could get everything you need. So it's really, this is where you guys are gonna have to, kind of play with it and see what's working best for you on the, architectural you're currently doing or lines you're currently working with. The lines here as well would work if you needed to do center points on these as well. If you needed to do the change of direction, it just depends on what you guys are needing to do when you're actually laying out. Obviously, I think these sleeves are more important. Yep. So what we can do is we're going to attempt to do over circles here. Okay.
So just to make this a little bit easier and clean this up a little bit, what I normally do when I need to put points on a bunch of circles and I want to area them off or window them off, I will, before I go to this point, I would select one of those circles and then hit select similar and then isolate them so that only the things I can see or select possibly in the future are those circles. So then you go down and hit select similar and then right click again. And then you can go to isolate up towards the top.
There it is.
And say isolate objects. So now I can window all of these off without worrying about selecting stuff I didn't want.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So when you're putting point, like that's what I would have done with the walls. That's what I would do with these. That's what I would do with the, if I wanted to mark out the runs of those underground pipes or whatever, just so I could window a lot of things off without selecting stuff I didn't want.
Yeah, it just cleans it up a little bit.
And then a lot of our customers, or what I used to do, is we would pick different point numbering ranges for different types of things so that when the guys in the field got this, they would say, oh, I know all of my stub ups are 100 series. All of my, hangers are 1000 series. All of my equipment bases might be something else. All of my walls are a different number range. So as soon as they see that point number, they know what they're going to be laying out That makes sense.
Yeah.
So we should have all our points. Go next. Then I'm gonna hit update drawing, and now we got our points.
And then if you right click, you can go back to that isolation thing and say end isolation. And everything pops back up. Like magic.
Yeah.
Making sense so far? And I'm not sure if we are going to have any blocks in here.
Do you guys use any blocks or?
Yeah, we have like some prefab stuff that James whipped up that we kind of just paste in the drawings here and there.
So the blocks, if you do an over the block, since we don't really have one in here, if you do an over block routine, it's going to put it on the insertion point. So depending on how you made that block, will dictate where that point goes. So if you did a block and your insertion point was 0, 0, and you put a bunch of those blocks in there, you'll get 15 points on top of each other at 0, 0. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to be careful. If that happened,
Kind of got a plan.
then you would do the inside of the block, and then you would edit that block and place the points in that block where you wanted them to show up.
Okay. I see.
And then it would update them all. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's not like it's broken. If you did your blocks like that, you can fix it by just putting them inserting them in the block. And the cool thing about the insert inside the block is if you got like an inertia base or anything like that where it's got 4 points that you want to mark out in one object, you can place all of those marks in there, and then every time you place that block, all 4 of those points are going to show up every time.
Okay.
I just wanted to
You do
make
update
sure.
drawing.
Yep. So because obviously those were 2-inch sleeves, so I wanted to move those to 2-inch because I was looking at it and I'm like, wait a minute, it's a 4-inch, right? So obviously we can do it, per sleeve size. And that's what I went and did is I just went and edited the group, and then I changed the name to sleeve _2 inch, right? And so now if we wanted to kind of do the same thing, like you said, we can go here. We could do select similar. Doesn't look like there's very many of these. That may be the only one, actually. So you may not want to.
How you layered these things and stuff like that. I believe you can use it. It might change the way you guys do your CAD later, just to make this portion easier and cleaner. But you'll figure it out once you get used to using it a little bit.
Okay. Any other questions as far as placing points?
Not really. I think you guys, the whole over the line tool and block tool and all that stuff, that's going to be huge. I guess that's something new for me. So, but other than that, yeah, I think that as far as inserting points, I did have a question about like associating elevations with certain points on like a 2D drawing,
Okay. Do you have a particular example?
We have a job coming up where we're going to be setting up hanger inserts, so an elevation to associate with each hanger would, I hadn't got around to figuring out how to put an elevation in with the point.
So if you're going to are you thinking about just putting circles where you need the inserts to be for your hangers?
Yeah, pretty much.
So normally you can't lay anything out on a job site to the exact elevation that it might end up, because you're laying out on a deck, you're laying out on, either metal deck or wood deck or whatever the layout portion is, right? the elevation of the point in the model doesn't really match what you're actually going to mark in the field. So the elevation probably not such a big deal, if that makes sense.
Okay, so it would be more, so, okay, so I could put it in the description so that way when, you know, they're laying out in the field, they could look at it and see, the hangar needs to be at this elevation, you know? That would be what you would do.
So to set like your bottom up, your BOP at a certain elevation.
Yeah.
Okay, so that would come so much later, maybe in the process, because you're doing your layout for your inserts before the concrete's even poured, right? And then after they pour the concrete and they pour all the decking down or whatever that they're going to be doing, or it's sheet metal pan deck, then they come back in and they start throwing the thread rod up and then setting their hangers that way. They're already gone. Like the total station guy's probably gone. Then you're looking at a drawing now for those guys to install that, because there would be no notes for them to read.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm just talking from what we used to do. I'm a mechanical contractor by trade. We started using these in '89.
Okay.
So I've done it every 6 ways to Sunday to find the most convenient.
So the elevation, associating like an elevation with the points is more for like Revit then? Is that?
It could be, or let's just say you needed you were installing a sloped line and you wanted to check it in the underground, right?
Yeah.
If you slope that line in AutoCAD at the slope that you wanted, and you place points on it, those points would be at the correct elevation, and then you could check it that way. So it just depends on how you guys do the model. So if the whole Revit model was done and it's all 3D, we can put points on all of those 3D objects, depending on what they're made out of, right? And it'll be at the elevation that's in that model.
Okay. So it just automatically puts elevation on there then.
Right. And then we have the option when we export the points, if you wanted to flatten them all out.
Oh, okay.
So that's what that means. Like, some people have really bad models, and you've probably seen some of these architectural backgrounds where stuff is just like 100 feet up and down because they didn't know how to do F8 or ortho mode. So there might be a toilet that's 200 feet below the actual. Right. Like some of those guys do stuff like that, and then you'd be like, oh man, I've got a freaking point down here minus 200 feet in elevation. Just not to confuse the guys in the field. When we export the points out, you can say just flatten these all to 0.
Okay.
All right. So I think. Oh, go ahead.
And then control points. Have you guys discussed or talked about control on the job site so that you can get this thing set up?
Not really. My whole idea was just setting up grid lines for control points, but I wasn't sure if that's how that works or not.
So if you were to walk out to the job site right now, what would you guys use to set up or start pulling string and tape, I guess?
It would probably be grid lines.
Now, is it something that you guys would have to put down, or did the GC put those down?
Sometimes they have them. Sometimes you have to ask them for them. If we could put them down ourselves, that would be huge.
So, like a 4 foot offset, or would you put them down exactly like they are on the grid?
I would probably put them on the point on the grid, and then depending on the conditions out there, whoever's in the field could probably offset the point while he's laying out. Maybe I don't know how that works.
So TDL has a few different ways it can set up. It can set up by reading a grid line on the ground, right? Take 2 shots on this grid line, take 2 shots on this grid line. Anything that you're trying to shoot in the field to set up with has to be in the model. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if those 2 things don't match, you're not going to get a very good layout. So if there's going to be a 4 foot offset, you need to make sure that those lines in the CAD file have that 4 foot offset.
Okay.
If you're going to use lines, if you're going to use points, and this is what I usually tell everybody. I mean, if you go out there and you do a 4 foot offset grid line layout, each one of those intersections is an actual point, right? So you could set up on one of those intersections, backside to another one of those intersections, and you're set up and ready to go. But they just have to match.
Right.
So you could put the points on in here if you wanted to, if you knew what you were going to run into down, out at the job site. And you guys are in California, right?
Yes.
So it's been a long time since I've ran into any job in California that did not have control on it. So you might just have to ask the particular GC, and they might like, oh yeah, here you go, it's right here, right? Or what I usually tell a lot of people is ask the structural guy what they're using for control, because at least when they put the structure up and they're measuring off of something, and you're trying to do the plumbing and you're measuring off of something, you guys end up in the same spot.
Right.
That's the key, right? If I go out there and measure off of something different, the electrical guy goes out there and measures off of something different, the wall guy's measuring off of something different, we all wind up in a different spot. And then we're trying to prove who's in the right spot and who's not. So we try to just make sure that we're on the same control, or pulling off the same lines as everybody else, and then they can let you know, and then you can just match it in your file, and you guys are ready to go. So a lot of the times I'll find that the structure guy is using the total station and he's got control, and he may give us his control points, and they may be 4 foot offsets off of something. I would go put those same ones in my file, and then I would go set up on his, or use his control too, and then we're all in the same spot.
Okay.
So it just depends on each job, in the GC, and what you guys ask for at the beginning of the project, right? If you don't ask, they don't know. So,
Right. Okay.
but you can place all that stuff in here. You can draw the grid lines in here that you want to, if you want to use those. If they don't have them in here, if there's a 4 foot offset and you want to use the grid line setup routine, you can draw whatever you want in here, just so that when it comes over to the data collector, matching points in the field, matching things and objects in the file, and you should be ready to go, if that makes sense. And if you guys have questions, get with Nick. If Nick can't answer it, he can get with us. If we need to get on with you guys for another 10 or 15 minutes to clear something up, that's not going to be a big deal. We want to make sure that you guys are up and running and this thing works as you need. But if you want to go through Preston, just showing them how to export this out, I guess, and making that MGF